Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Erasma Veras Montecholo, and I am your host for Powering Up with Power of Two, in which we engage with community leaders, residents, advocates to talk about the pressing issues affecting families and children in New York City and the steps that we can all take as a collective and as individuals to ensure the health and well-being of our communities. A couple of reminders before we begin. We will make this video accessible in Spanish, and closed captioning is available for those differently abled. We also encourage you to share your questions with us in the chat. As you all know, at Power of Two, we partner with families to help tap into responsive parenting as a way to heal from intergenerational trauma, to create healthier trajectories for our children, build upon our community's foundation of resilience, and harness the collective power of community to dismantle systems of oppression. In April 2020, Community Service Society housing analyst Tom Waters, before his passing, reminded us in his final research report with Oksana Mironova that COVID-19 is the latest stressor that exposes a rolling structural crisis in our housing provision system, and the most affected are people of color. I want to make clear, however, to those that are listening today, that poverty alone does not account for the stark inequities with homelessness. The disparities we are seeing are the results of centuries of discrimination in housing, criminal justice, child welfare, and education. However, there is some good news as of late. And the good news is that homelessness is being centered at the federal, at the state, and city levels, thanks to advocates like our guest today, Shams DaBaron. Shams is lovingly and respectfully known as the homeless hero. Shams is a hip hop artist, a filmmaker, a father, a truth teller, an advocate, and he will talk with us today about his experiences in the shelter system, his thoughts on the recent city council's introduction of 146C legislation, and where do we go from here? Thank you so much, Shams, for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here, and always, I appreciate when the voices of directly impacted people are centered and involved in conversations dealing with the issues that affect us. So I'm grateful for being here. Normally I would open up with a few words, but I just want to really allow time so that the questions that you have will be answered. And I'm going to try my best for the first time not to do any sermons.
I just want you to be you, I just want you to be yourself. We're all authentic people. We're here genuine. We're here in the good fight together. So just be you. Okay. One of the things that I really I like to do with community partners and with advocates is really talk about your personal connection to this work. So let's start off by asking, for those that don't know Shams, and if you don't know him, get to know him, please. What is your personal connection to the work that you're doing right now?
Well, first of all, I'm directly impacted. I'm homeless. Well, not homeless today, but I've been experiencing homelessness since the age of 10, on and off. I grew up in the foster care system since the age of 2. So, from 10 years old, I was basically struggling, just trying to, survive in the streets and stuff like that. By the age of 12, I was ironically discharged from the foster care agency that oversaw me and stuff like that. Like, I couldn't go back to them. So I spent many years, on and off experiencing homelessness. I actually raised my son in the family shelter system throughout his entire junior high school years and his high school years, and then ended up having to deal with homelessness as an adult, So as a directly impacted person, I come to this space as someone who has years of experience, trying to navigate, this the experience of homelessness.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing, that very personal story with us. Um, I strongly believe that the most impacted are the folks that actually have the answers and have the solutions, right? We just need to make space to be heard, and others need to make space to allow us to be heard, right? One of the things that I want to ask you about, as you mentioned that you basically grew up in the shelter system, right? That you were in and out. You were there as a single man, and then you went back in as a family man, as a father. Can you share with us like how those experiences differed, right? Because I think that there's like a misconception out here in New York about, the people that experience homelessness. So can you give us a sense of what the difference was when you were a single man in a shelter versus being a father, a dad, and raising your son in the shelter system?
I would say, in a way, it's a huge difference. The first time I entered the shelter system was as a parent. And at that time, under Giuliani, I believe it was, there weren't, I had to go through a ton of things uh, because they didn't accept the idea that a father would be taking care of his child. So they were doing things to me like, hey, you have to prove that you're the father. Okay. I bring you back the paternity stuff from the court, you know. Then they go, well, you have to prove that you have custody. I go to the court, and the court is telling me, you don't have to do that. I'm, I'm not, there's no, like, if the mother walks in there, the mother doesn't have to prove that she has custody. And you have the exact same rights that the mother had. But I spent months being denied. They had this 10-day thing where they'll place you in different places. First of all, the places wasn't even suitable for men with children. Because I didn't have a huge family, they couldn't really find a place for me. They couldn't put me in a single shelter. They couldn't put me in an SRO. They would send me to places that were crazy. And then the other thing was that for single parents, normally it would be DV shelters and stuff like that. So obviously, putting a male in a DV shelter might not necessarily be the ideal situation. So I spent months, doing 10 days here, doing 10 days there with my son and being denied. We always knew that by the 10 days, we were going to have to go back, start the process over, and be placed somewhere else. So it was just a cycle. Imagine me trying to keep him in school and stuff like that. So the school is looking like, oh, you're not doing your job, you're this and that, how you moving, it's just crazy. So eventually, I in the original effort, I ended up leaving the state. And when I left the state, I was able to get some stabilization and stuff like that and get services. All this time, I never was able to get medical, PA, or anything like that for him. So, and then raising a son, I have a history in the streets, going way back. But I always had to battle. Do I go back in the streets and make this money and do it, the way I know how to do it? Or do I stay legit and try to be the parent I want to be? That was always difficult for me, and I always say, there was one or two times I relapsed and, had to do what I had to do. But, it's horrible that this was the experience. Thank God that my son was not so negatively affected that today he's dealing with issues. No, he's great right now, and those experiences made him strong. But it wasn't that simple. It wasn't easy back then. There weren't a lot of men taking their children into the shelter system. They thought we all were pulling scams because we were trying to get apartments and stuff. And I remember being at EAU in the Bronx, not the EAU you see now.
Mm-hmm.
When I was there, I was horrified walking through the doors because it was set up somewhat like how you would picture uh, um, uh, the welfare centers when you go for public assistance and stuff. But when we go through, these are the places where you have to go as a family to get placed in a place. We stayed there for weeks in the initial time. And during that time, I saw riots take place. A 16-year-old committed suicide. Babies were sleeping on the floor. And nobody knows this, but I called Help Me Howard.
Mm.
Help Me Howard came out with the cameras. I wasn't there. I wasn't trying to be on no camera. But he did a report on it. And after that, the mayor and the city decided to move people to a jail, which was the former Bronx House of Detention. That was the idea. Well, we won't let them stay here because there was a big lawsuit. They had to pay money and stuff like that if you stayed at night in that place and stuff like that. I said to myself that I'm not walking my son into a jail because he's homeless, because we're homeless. And that's what made me leave the state of New York, you know. So that versus me as an adult, you know, as a father, you know, having to navigate taking care of not just myself, but my young son who is unable to necessarily take care of himself. He's not an adult. He's going to school. That's hard and that's traumatic, you know, and we did everything we can. There's so much more to that story, but we did everything we can to survive. And I'll end this part with that. I'll end this with this. The greatest thing for me was graduation day for him from high school. And we went through so much just to get to that place. And even up until the moment, you know, I don't want to get too personal, but he went, I don't want to get too personal. Just put it this way.
I'm here for it, Shams. I'm here for it. Just know that.
He almost didn't make it. Wait, didn't I say I wasn't going to mince no words?
Yes, you did.
Okay,
that's your promise to me.
I contacted his mother and said, this you need to be here for.
Mm-hmm.
We got to the place where the graduation was taking place, and he said, Dad, I got to go get my mother. She didn't come. I said, wait, you know, you can't go to graduate. He said, I got to do it. He went, left me, the graduation's going on. And his mother was a no-show, in other words. Mm-hmm. And I stood there while the kids was going and the emotions came, because it was like, this was the crowning achievement. It's like all that we went through, I was able to get them through school. Give us this victory. And I remember standing outside. I had to leave because I didn't know where he was at. And there, like, the kids are about to be called to accept their diplomas. And I'm seeing kids come and I'm thinking, oh, that's him. It's not him. And then the time is passing. Teachers are coming and they saying, and my son was an academic star. He's that guy in the school. So like they really wanted him. He's supporting everybody else. He's their inspiration. And it's like, he's not even on the set. Mm-hmm. So they're looking like, what is going on? And, you know, he had his suit, but they got the gowns and stuff like that. So they're like, look, I'm going to stand by the stage with his cap and gown. If he comes, just rush him in, you know. And I'm out there and I start crying. I'm in tears. I'm like, oh, man. I just felt like I failed. Like we did all of this and I failed. And then out of nowhere, I see this kid running in this suit. And he's just in the seat. And I'm like, oh, that's him. Ah. And I'm like, I hug him and I rush him in. And I mean, the kids in this class are literally on the stage going, they all getting their diplomas. And he jumps right in line, puts his stuff on, and he grabs his diploma. And that was the crowning achievement for me in that experience as a single parent navigating the shelter system.
Shams, wow, that, man, thank you for sharing that, right? Because sometimes, I've been talking to a lot of people like on the street and people that I know, and getting a sense of how they perceive, people that are experiencing homelessness, right? And their perceptions are just completely out of whack with the reality, right? That there are people like you that are raising children, that are doing the best that you can, that are navigating all these different systems. And you said it yourself, not only are you trying to figure out the shelter and accommodations for yourself and your son, but you're also having to deal with, probably, administrators and teachers at school who are just like, why isn't this kid here? And not fully understanding all that was happening in your life. And then you're working within those two systems, and then probably, also aware and, anxious about potentially getting involved in the child welfare system, because that usually is what happens, right? And so, and then to get to this moment, yeah, no, exactly. But my point is that to get to this moment, with your son, after all of those trials and tribulations, is just an incredible achievement, and speaks to your resilience, your power, your ability to push through, even through the tough times. And you're still doing it today. And you're doing it not just for yourself, but you're doing it for thousands of people that are experiencing homelessness here in New York. And that is just incredible. And so I just want to pause, and I just want to say thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for, doing all that you've done for your son, because, he's going to pay it forward. Right? He's going to thrive, and he's going to help others thrive as well. So thank you. And I hope you continue to carry that with you, because it is an amazing achievement for both of you. Yeah. One of the things.
Let me say this.
Go ahead. Yeah, sure.
My other kids would go crazy. I got 6 kids. They would go crazy. They had to suffer too, and they had to experience. They have their own experience, although they weren't with me in that experience. They have to deal with, with my dad and this and that. So there's a whole story to that. But I will say that I do gotta say that I'm just fortunate that after all of this, we have such great relationships now, and I'm growing because of them as well, and it's just, just at the end of the day, I didn't want them to have to experience what I experienced, not just in not having a mother or father there all the time. And I love my mother and father, because I wouldn't be who I am without them. So there's no getting around that. And I don't want to be nobody else.
Right.
But the reality is that I didn't want them to go through what I went through. Just the being a child of the foster care system. It was difficult to understand what love was. It was difficult to understand what family was. And so I wasn't perfect, but I tried to do as much as I can to give them that experience. So, we all went through this, and so my children, they have grown through it, and they have benefited as well, and I've benefited from it, and I'm just glad that that is, it's not the horror stories that some of my friends and some of my peers tell,
Right.
So.
Yeah. Shams, thank you for saying that as well. And, because that's something that we remind the families and the parents that we partner with, about, we share with them that it's not an expectation of you being perfect 100% of the time. Life happens, stress happens. It's just remembering that one of the most important, cherished values in our life are our children, and finding ways to prioritize our children, finding ways to nurture and to strengthen those relationships. Because no matter what's going on in the big bad world, if those bonds, those relationships are strong, you know what? It's like you create this buffer where all of that bad juju is just bouncing off, and that is exactly what you did, and continue to do. So, thank you so much for that. I want to kind of shift a little bit and talk about last year and what happened related to COVID and the impact that it has had on people experiencing homelessness. And I've obviously, I've been in Brownsville. I've seen it all happen. I've read all the things that happen at the Lucerne, and what I am like so proud of and so grateful of is that advocates like yourself really push the city to move people experiencing homelessness into hotels during the pandemic, right? That was so important because it allowed people the space, right? They allowed people to be healthy, allowed people that weren't healthy to have a space in which they could get healthy. And so I'm hearing recently that, the city, now that we're reopening, is looking to put folks back into congregate shelters. And I really want to know, what is your thinking about that?
Well, I think I'm going to try to answer this real as quick as possible, but it's such an important question. Without getting into the history of the Lucerne, we can do that too, but let me just respond to that. Yeah. And this is where I can't mince words. Mm-hmm. I think that, that what we have in New York City under Governor Cuomo and de Blasio, the mayor, is a shelter industrial complex. And I believe that the mayor's decision to send people back into these congregate shelters is just really to sustain that shelter industrial complex. I believe, and a lot of people don't want to draw the connections to slavery. They don't want to draw the connections to Jim Crow, and they don't want to draw the connections to all of the crazy stuff that happened after Reconstruction. I said crazy stuff that happened after Reconstruction. We about to go on the 100-year anniversary of the Tulsa massacre.
That's right.
In a couple of days. And what I believe is that those of us that experience in homelessness, we are in New York City, I could tell you, we are the victims of systemic racism. We are victims of a city that has codified the sustenance of the sustaining of white supremacy. These are difficult words. These are things that we don't want to talk about. But how you on one level talking about the George Floyd murder? How you talking about the injustice to Black people throughout America, and yet you don't see the correlation with what you're doing with the homeless population that is 90% Black and brown?
That's right.
When you walk into a shelter, it's a dehumanizing process. The way you are treated, the policies that they have, they're dehumanizing policies. They reduce you to nothing. Why is that correlated to slavery? Because that is what made slavery acceptable to so many people, so many countries. They were able to codify the transatlantic slave trade because they were able to reduce us to less than human beings. So much so that the Constitution said that we are 3/5 of humans. So when you look at what the mayor's policies are, they're not respecting our humanity. They don't give a damn if I have children. They tell me straight up, worry about yourself. But what about my 16-year-old? This is what they do. And this is done because at the end of the day, when you look, this is coming back from the 70s with Koch. You know, because a lot of people like to talk about Giuliani and they like to talk about Bloomberg and they want to go Republican versus Democrat. But the reality is, Koch is one of the main culprits in this. Dinkins continued that. And de Blasio is the worst of them all. Why? What am I talking about? I'm talking about them giving tax abatements to big real estate companies to come into the communities and change the dynamic of our communities. Y'all call it gentrification. This is the real issue that we're dealing with. When you look at the rise of crime, study gentrification. Anywhere in the country where gentrification takes place, there's always a rise in crime. Because people are being moved around and they're being put into a box. And that creates a lot of issues. Because now we're scrapping for nothing, for nothing, basically. But the people that are benefiting is the big real estate and those who are able to take advantage of, our communities. Yet what's going to happen to us? Those of us that are living in these dilapidated buildings that may, we work every day, but we want a step up. Or our family is growing and we want to step up. Those of us that are homeless, what are we going to do? You done built 10 shelters in the community. So now you building up 2 buildings, 3 buildings. How come I can't get in the building? Because the AMI level is so damn high that it's impossible. Not just for me, but for the people that are working, that long-time residents of the community. This is causing problems, but this is codified stuff to keep us in perpetual oppression. We'll never rise like that.
No, you're absolutely right. We saw it. We saw it with redlining. We saw it before that. I had a conversation with Heather McGee. She's the author of The Sum of Us, and she used this really powerful metaphor about the draining of the pools, right? And how pools were drained just so that Black folks couldn't use the pools. And so that meant that not only did Black folks didn't get to use the pools, but neither did white people. So everyone was losing. And, it's the same thing that we're seeing perpetuated across all the systems and across our city. But some would argue, though, Shams, like, for example, that, the passing yesterday of the introduction 146C, which increases the city FEPS vouchers as a step forward in helping to alleviate some of that systemic racism that is inherent to the housing system. What are your thoughts on that? First of all, are you happy? Are you happy about this vote? And then 2, do you see it as a stepping stone to something bigger?
Well, let me just say this. It's a bill that's been on the table for 3+ years. All right. It shouldn't have took that long. The number one, the fact that it took that long says something about those that are in leadership. That why did it take this long for you not to see that how valuable this was? They would argue that because there's a state bill and we want that to go because we don't want the city to pay the money, let the state pay the money, and all these politics. But in those 3 years, can you think of how much money it costs to keep people in shelters? That's number one. How many lives were lost while they were in shelters? What are the health conditions of people that have deteriorated in those shelters? 3 years we're talking.
Right.
So, that's something we got to keep in mind. The other thing is that, yeah, I applaud all of the activists, all of the directly impacted people, all of those who supported it. I applaud, Stephen Levine. I applaud Corey Johnson. I love Corey Johnson. It's my guy. And Christine Quinn. All of the people who voted for this. Yes. Yeah, I applaud them. But what I got to be realistic about is, why the hell the bill that we agreed to, that the activists, the advocates, and the directly impacted people was okay with, why, after we do the press conference and this and that, the mayor calls the speaker and says, yo, we got some problems with this. We can't do this. We got to change this. We got to take this out. We got to take that. So we got to turn the B into the C. What the hell? Yeah, we glad that we got something through. But the reality is, it's the same old same. You got a mayor that is really perpetuating a cycle of dependence. He's perpetuating substance use disorder, mental illness, in order to maintain this shelter industrial complex.
Yeah.
Many of us will return to the shelter in 5 years. Some of us in a year that hold this voucher. And the only ones that may benefit is the real estate people. And I'm not anti-real estate, trust me on that. But I'm just saying that we have to begin working out deals that benefit the people of this city on all levels. And it could be done. But this mayor, because you look at him, most of these people that he's doing favors for are people that contributed to his campaigns. My contention is that there's a criminal element to this. These things, if it's homeless people, you can hide all this, because who the hell care about the homeless? Unfortunately, I'm standing up, and there's people with me, and a lot of other people are standing up today. Mm-hmm. And so we're exposing this. But the reality, this was going on for years. It didn't just come with COVID, like some people think. It didn't just come with, the Lucerne, like some people think. This thing been going on for years.
Yeah.
But this mayor, I believe, is committing crimes against the homeless population. He is violating the civil rights of them. He is violating their human rights by the policies that he's putting in place, because it's not helping us. It is putting us in detrimental situations. And that was the foundation of why I challenged him at the Lucerne. I said that what you're doing is causing trauma on top of trauma. We are people with disabilities, according to federal law.
Right. We
deal with substance use disorder and mental illness. The shelter that I'm a part of, Project Renewal, which oversees the shelter at us at the Lucerne, we have a cluster site of people that are dealing with mental illness and substance use disorder. Those are considered disabilities. So why are we not protected by the Disability Act?
Those are good questions, Shams. And, I think there are folks actually in the chat who are asking about what can they do? Like, what are some well-trusted groups that, folks can get involved with to organize alongside folks without homes? So folks that are experiencing homelessness, right?
That's a good question. And I get that question a lot. And sometimes I don't even think I answer it the way I need to answer it. So
in other words, Shams, that there are people that are hearing you and are seeing it and want to do something, right? So what is your recommendation for them?
Okay, so first and foremost, I got to shout out and direct you to the Upper West Side Open Hearts Initiative. That is the group. It's just a bunch of moms. They basically radical ladies with their kids that
Love
came
that.
in, and they're a bunch of radical ladies, but they came and worked with us. It's not even a real nonprofit or anything like that. It's just people that were concerned in their community and wanted to help the homeless population that was temporarily placed there. Um, but Open Hearts is definitely a group that I would always suggest that you get involved with, help and stuff like that. And one of the reasons why is because their initiatives have been directly impactful towards people that are experiencing homelessness. And it's things like in terms of, life skill classes, on-site services that they help to provide, and forming a partnership with Project Renewal and stuff like that. It really benefits, and not just Project Renewal, it really benefits the community that they're in. And that's the real thing. It's like you want to partner with organizations that are involved in community engagement, that really engage the community. All Angels Church is in the same community. They should be supported. Guarded Riverside, who provided 50 jobs for the men of the Lucerne, should be supported. They 50 jobs. They had anonymous donations of 250,000 initially, and then other donations came in that gave us $500,000 just for the men of the Lucerne. Guarded Riverside has to be supported.
Yeah.
Project
Yeah.
Renewal, they have listened to myself, to the community, to the men of the Lucerne and their residents and staff members. And they have immediately made changes that would benefit us in a positive way. We have to support groups like that as well. But then
That's
there are
right.
also like Safety Net, Vocal New York, Neighbors Together. I can go on and on and on and on. There are so many groups that are out here that will go. Human New York, RX Home. There are so many groups, and I would say, please support these groups, even if it's a matter of just attending Coalition of the Legal Aid Society, even if it's just attending their workshops and stuff like that, because you can get information. I don't speak because I'm an expert. You know what I mean? I really engage all of them so that I can be infused with the right information. And not only that, and I'm gonna tell you the most important thing. What I do every night, and I've been doing it forever, is I go out in the streets and I talk to directly impacted people. I have conversations with them. I'm able to say what I say because I know that I'm not just representing my own thought and my own position. I'm also speaking for that person because they are the ones who are letting me know what's going on, how they feel, what their experiences are. And you have to support them. You have to speak to them.
That's right. That's incredibly powerful, and it's what we do as part of our work too, is that we center our community voice, right, in everything that we do, and it's something that we want our elected officials to do as well. And so one of the questions that just came up is, Shams, why do you think it important that New York voters pay attention and learn more about the candidates, not just for mayor, but district attorney, city council, and more?
Great question. Great question. This election, I believe, and I'm a little older now, but I think in every age group, this particular election is the most important election of our lifetimes. It would determine, for those of us that's a little older, it would determine how we age out and how we exist for the next for the next 10 years, I believe. For our children that are in adulthood, it would determine how they could see. Some of them are beholden with college debt. Some of them just trying to make it. The rent is a struggle for them. And then for the children coming after, these are the ones that got to deal with a whole lot of issues. And we have the unique opportunity today because we have a diverse amount of candidates. Most of these candidates are great, and so that makes it a little difficult on who you're going to choose. But in this instance, this is the first time we've ever had ranked choice voting. And we have to take advantage of that, So we should all be engaged because I'm telling you, if you get the wrong person in, it's going to negatively affect us in ways that you wouldn't imagine. We are really on the brink of a race war. I know y'all don't want to hear that because y'all think that's just in some other town.
No, it's real. People know that the moment is now, right? There's a racial reckoning happening, and we all play a role, and we all must get involved, right? We must all engage, and the time is now to really mobilize ourselves individually, but also as part of a collective, right? So all of those organizations that are actively advocating on a regular basis is super, super key. I know that we have just a few short moments, and I want to make sure that I give you an opportunity, Shams, to share your vision for New York City in the coming years. What is your vision?
That's not an easy question to answer. I'll be honest. I really want to see a recovered New York. I don't want to go back to what we had because what we had wasn't good for the whole of New York. We did 8 years of de Blasio, and it's a horrible situation that we are now. I want to see a New York that is thriving. New York, in my opinion, is the heartbeat of this nation, probably the world. It's the financial capital of the world. And it's one of the most diverse cities in the country. We have everybody here, and that is our strength. What has happened is that and it's been like this for such a long time. There's so much division here that we can't mobilize and collectively come together in order to make this city the great city that it has the potential to be. And the wealth inequality is such a bad thing. And it's affecting everybody. You got this, what they say, tax the rich, tax the billionaires, and stuff like that. And there's so many people in between, and then there's some people that's just like me, that's just on the very bottom. Like, you can't tax me for nothing, because I don't make nothing. And it's like, but what if we were able to bring this together and then level this thing out so that people like me could rise up, people that are not billionaires could actually thrive, and live good, so real estate is important in that equation because that's like the basis: food, clothing, and shelter. The basis, you need shelter. And so we have to approach real estate in a way that makes sense to the entire New York City. Also, our bankers, we are the financial capital of the world, and banking ain't just putting your money in a bank account and starting a savings account or just doing a little CD or nothing like that. There's so much value in bankers that we need to change the relationship we have with the banking community so that they can help us rebuild our city and make the distressed communities more thriving. So when we talk about public safety and crime, I'm particularly concerned with crime in my hoods. You know what I'm saying? Where I see gang violence and stuff like that going on. And I'm like, that stuff could be solved. There was a time we were solving it. But there were other entities that it didn't fit their interests, so they came and shut us down. So that was years ago, but we're in a different place. Now, what if we were able to form these partnerships that we're able to go into the communities and give better opportunities to youth? I am the product of all of that. So I know what it's like to be able to get a job opportunity. I know what it's like when I'm able to get funding for my dream and able to turn my t-shirt business into a thriving business. These kids out here that we think is wild and crazy, they have those same dreams. It's just that there's nothing in the community to support them. So I want to see a New York that recognizes that I want to try and quote Martin Luther King, but I don't think I got the quote on deck. But
just do your thing.
No man is indivisible of itself. No man is an island of itself. You know that's John Donne. But listen, the bottom line is we're all in this together. That's right. It's not about division here, division there, West Coast versus OHI or Bloods versus Crips and all that. No, we all in here together, and that's our diversity that can make us special. You know, if we came and we were able to communicate and have dialogue, we can really come up with good answers as to how we all could thrive. I'm in Harlem, and I'll end that with this. I'm in Harlem, and I don't see fear in the eyes of the white and people that came here through gentrification. I deal with quite a few of them. I don't see fear. And in my mind, I'm like, how you not scared to come out and say that? And they're like, yeah, you know. And I'm like, there's a definite disparity between wealth in Harlem. Mm-hmm. Yet, the people are able to coexist. The only thing is that we need to bring up those who are not necessarily up. We need to bring them up. We need to give them things like better education, access to resources, you know, opportunities, not just jobs. A lot of these people out here, they're selling food on the streets and they're doing different things. We need to make it easier for them to access opportunities where they can grow their businesses and they can become entrepreneurs and do their thing.
That's right. That's right. Shams, I think, you know, what you're describing is, you know, a community, a nation that understands that, you know, opportunity and progress is not a pizza pie, right? That you have only this number of slices and whoever gets it, that's it. No, that, you know, progress and opportunity is available to everyone if we can all just do it together. So I wish we had more time. Sadly, we don't. And I just want to thank you for giving us your time, your experience, sharing, you know, the advocacy that you're doing. And I want you to know before you leave today that we got you. And we're here for it. And we're here to support you in any which way that we can and support, you know, all of our New Yorkers together. So thank you so much, Shams, for that. The homeless hero, folks. To all of you watching and listening, I will leave you with this quote from Maya Angelou, and that is that the ache for home lives within all of us. It's the safe place where we can go as we are and not be questioned. And folks, everyone in New York should be housed, and everyone in New York should be able to progress. Thank you all, and take good care. Bye-bye.
Thanks.